I thought signing as guarantor for my wife's cousin would help family. Instead, it nearly killed me. When Vance's fist shattered my ribs and my wife told me to stay out of it, I made one click that destroyed their dream home forever. What they did next will shock you. Revenge tastes sweet. My name is Marshall Whitmore. I'm 43 years old, and I used to believe that family meant having each other's backs. That belief cost me everything, but it also taught me who I really am. The whole mess started 6 months ago when Bridget's cousin Vance Sullivan came knocking on our door in Phoenix. Vance had this grand plan to flip houses, and he needed someone with a solid credit score to co-sign on a loan. Bridget practically begged me to help him out. Marshall, he's family, Bridget said, standing in our kitchen while 12-year-old Miles did his homework at the counter. He's been struggling since his divorce, and this could really turn his life around. I should have said no right then and there. But Vance put on quite the show. Spreadsheets, projections, promises of paying me back with interest. The guy seemed to have it all figured out. Plus, with my background in insurance, I thought I understood risk assessment pretty well. Dad, are you really going to help Uncle Vance? Miles asked, looking up from his math problems. We'll see, buddy. I replied, ruffling his hair. Sometimes family needs help. That decision haunts me now. Not because I helped, but because I didn't realize I was being set up. The paperwork was extensive, a $200,000 loan for a property in Scottsdale. As I signed document after document, Bridget stood beside me, squeezing my shoulders supportively. Vance kept thanking me, promising this was going to change everything for his family. You won't regret this, Marshall, Vance said, shaking my hand firmly. I've got buyers lined up already. 6 months tops, and this loan will be paid off. I filed the papers in my home office, right next to my insurance licenses and family photos. Everything seemed legitimate, organized, and above board. That's what made what happened next so devastating. The first sign of trouble came 3 months later. Vance missed his first payment. When I called him, he had excuses, permit delays, contractor issues, the usual stuff that happens in construction. Bridget assured me it was temporary. He's working 16-hour days. Marshall, she said, cut him some slack. But then I started getting calls from the bank. Late fees were piling up, and as the co-signer, I was ultimately responsible. That's when I decided to drive by the property to see the progress for myself. What I found changed everything. The house sat exactly as it had 3 months earlier. No work had been done. No contractors. No materials. Nothing. Just an empty lot with an overpriced foundation and my name on a massive debt. I called Vance immediately, demanding answers. His phone went straight to voicemail. Then I tried reaching him through Bridget's sister, Melody. That conversation opened my eyes to things I never wanted to know about my wife's family. Marshall, Melody said quietly, there are things about Vance you need to know. Things Bridget should have told you. The conversation with Melody changed everything. She told me things about Vance that made my blood run cold. Previous scams, fake businesses, a pattern of using family members as unwitting accomplices. When I confronted Bridget that evening, she exploded. How dare you go behind my back and talk to my sister? Bridget shouted from across our living room. Miles had gone to bed, thankfully sparing him from witnessing his parents' marriage implode in real time. I had every right to investigate. I replied, keeping my voice steady. My name is on that loan, Bridget. My financial future is tied to your cousin's lies. Vance isn't lying. He's been through a rough patch. That's all. A rough patch? The man has been running cons for years. Melody showed me the police reports. That's when Bridget made the call that sealed my fate. She picked up her phone and speed-dialed Vance, putting it on speaker. Vance, you need to come over here right now, she said. Marshall is causing problems. Within 20 minutes, Vance was pounding on our front door. I could hear him shouting from the driveway, his voice slurred with alcohol. When I opened the door, his eyes were bloodshot and his fists were already clenched. You son of a gun, Vance yelled, stepping into my house uninvited. Who do you think you are? Checking up on me like some kind of detective. I think I'm the guy whose name is on your loan, I said, standing my ground. The guy who's about to lose his house because you've been lying from day one. That's when he hit me. No warning, no escalation, just a straight punch to my jaw that sent me stumbling backward into the coffee table. I heard Bridget gasp, but she didn't move to help me. Vance, stop, she called out, but it sounded more like a suggestion than a command. He didn't stop. The second punch caught me in the ribs, driving the air from my lungs. I tried to defend myself, but Vance was bigger and clearly had experience with violence. He grabbed me by the shirt and threw me against the wall, my shoulder hitting the family photo that hung there. "You want to play detective?" he snarled, his face inches from mine. "Keep your nose out of my business, or next time will be worse." I tasted blood in my mouth and felt my left eye swelling shut. Through the haze of pain, I looked at my wife, waiting for her to defend me, to call the police, to do something. Instead, she stood frozen by the couch, her phone in her hand. "Marshall," Bridget said quietly, "maybe you should just stay out of it from now on." Those words hit harder than any punch. My own wife, choosing her criminal cousin over her beaten husband. That's when I knew our marriage was over, and my real fight was just beginning. The emergency room at Phoenix General was buzzing with activity at 2 a.m., but I felt completely alone as the nurse examined my injuries. My left eye was swollen shut, my jaw felt like it might be fractured, and every breath sent sharp pains through my ribs. "Mr. Whitmore, we need to document these injuries properly," said Dr. Sarah Chun, a no-nonsense physician who'd seen her share of assault cases. "This wasn't an accident, was it?" "No, ma'am," I replied, wincing as she examined my jaw. "My wife's cousin attacked me in my own home." "And where is your wife now?" That question stung more than the physical pain. "She stayed home with our son." Dr. Chin raised an eyebrow, but didn't comment. She took photographs of my injuries, ordered x-rays, and made detailed notes in my medical file. The x-rays showed 2 broken ribs and a hairline fracture in my jaw. "You're going to need these records if you press charges," she said, handing me copies of everything. "I strongly recommend you do." I drove home as the sun was rising, my head pounding and my vision still blurry. Bridget was waiting in the kitchen, fully dressed, with 2 suitcases by the door. "Marshall, we need to talk," she said without looking at me. "About what?" "About how your cousin nearly put me in the hospital. About how you stood there and did nothing. About how you've been trying to destroy my family," she shot back. "Vance called me after you left. He told me what you've really been doing, investigating him, talking to banks, trying to sabotage his business." I stared at her in disbelief. "His business is a fraud, Bridget. He's been using our loan to fund other scams. I have the bank records to prove it. You have paranoid theories and a grudge." That's when I noticed Miles standing at the top of the stairs, still in his pajamas, listening to every word. His face was pale, and I could see the confusion and fear in his eyes. "Son, come down here," I called to him. "We need to talk." Miles slowly descended the stairs, staying close to the wall like he was afraid of getting caught in the crossfire. "Dad, what happened to your face?" he asked quietly. "Uncle Vance hurt your father because he was asking too many questions," Bridget said before I could answer. "Bridget," I snapped, "don't put this on our son." "I'm taking Miles to stay with my mother for a while," she announced, "until you get your head straight and stop this crusade against my family." "You're not taking my son anywhere," I said, my voice deadly serious despite the pain. "Especially not to protect the man who did this to me." But as I looked at Miles, I realized the damage was already done. My 12-year-old boy had watched his family fall apart in one night, and now he was being forced to choose sides. 3 days later, I was sitting in my home office with ice packs on my ribs and legal documents spread across my desk. Melody had called that morning with information that changed everything. "Marshall, you need to know what Vance is planning," she said, her voice shaking. "He's not just stealing from you. He's been moving money through fake companies, using family members' identities, setting up a whole network of fraud." "How do you know all this?" "Because he tried to recruit me. When I refused, he threatened me, just like he threatened you." I looked at the loan documents I'd signed 6 months earlier, my signature binding me to $250,000 in debt for a criminal enterprise. But then I remembered something Dr. Chun had said about documentation and evidence. "Melody, can you give me proof of what he's been doing?" "I already have it. Bank records, fake invoices, everything." "But Marshall, if we expose this, it's going to destroy more than just Vance. Bridget's been helping him. She's been moving money through her own accounts." The betrayal ran deeper than I'd imagined. My wife wasn't just enabling Vance. She was an active participant in the fraud. That's when I made the decision that would change everything. I called the bank's fraud department and reported the loan as part of a criminal scheme. Within hours, they had frozen all accounts associated with the loan and flagged it for investigation. Then I did something that felt both devastating and liberating. I formally withdrew my guarantee on the loan. The legal process was surprisingly simple. Since fraud had been committed, I had grounds to void my co-signature. The bank's lawyers assured me that I wouldn't be held liable for money that had been stolen through criminal activity. My phone started ringing immediately. First Bridget, then Vance, then various family members who'd somehow gotten wind of what was happening. I let them all go to voicemail. But the most important call came from Julian Miles, calling from his grandmother's house. "Dad, Mom's really upset," he said. "She's crying and saying you've ruined everything." "But Dad, I saw Uncle Vance hit you. That wasn't right." "No, son, it wasn't right. And neither is what he's been doing with that loan money. Are you going to be okay?" I looked around my quiet house, at the family photos still scattered on the floor from the fight, at the medical reports documenting my injuries, at the legal papers that would soon make Vance's crimes public knowledge. "Yes, son, we're both going to be okay. But things are going to be different now." When I hung up, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: control. For the first time since this nightmare began, I was the one making decisions instead of being victimized by other people's choices. Vance's house of cards was about to collapse, and I was the one holding the match. The FBI showed up at my door on a Tuesday morning, badges gleaming in the Arizona sun. Special Agent Rodriguez was a sharp-dressed woman in her 40s who spoke with the kind of authority that comes from years of financial crime investigation. "Mr. Whitmore, we understand you've been cooperating with the bank's fraud investigation regarding Vance Sullivan," she said, settling into my living room chair. "We'd like to discuss expanding that cooperation." "What do you mean by expanding?" Agent Rodriguez opened a thick file folder. "Mr. Sullivan's operation is bigger than just your loan. We're tracking at least 12 other victims across 3 states, with total losses exceeding $2 million. Your case might be the key to bringing down the entire network." I studied the photos and documents she spread across my coffee table. Bank records, fake business licenses, forged contracts. It was like looking at a criminal enterprise that had been operating for years. "My wife," I said carefully. "How involved is she?" "That depends on how much she knew and when she knew it. Right now, we're treating her as a potential witness rather than a suspect. But that could change if we discover she actively participated in the fraud." The next morning, Melody called with news that made my blood boil. "Marshall, Bridget is trying to take Miles out of state," she said, her voice urgent. "She's telling everyone you've become dangerous and unstable. She's filing for emergency custody." I hung up and immediately called my lawyer, Tom Davidson, a family attorney I'd worked with on insurance cases. Within 2 hours, we were filing our own emergency motion, supported by medical record for my assault and FBI documentation of the fraud case. "Marshall, this custody battle is going to get ugly," Tom warned me. "Bridget's going to paint you as obsessed with revenge, willing to destroy her family over money." "Let her try," I replied. "I have hospital records showing what her family did to me, and federal agents who can testify about their criminal activity." The temporary custody hearing was scheduled for Friday. That gave me 3 days to prepare, and I used every hour strategically. I met with Miles at a neutral location, a park near his school where Bridget had agreed to supervise visitation. My son looked tired and confused, caught between parents who were telling him very different stories. "Dad, Mom says you're trying to hurt Uncle Vance because you don't like him," Miles said, sitting on a swing while I pushed him gently. "Son, Uncle Vance hurt me because I discovered he was stealing money. The police arrested him because he broke the law, not because I don't like him. But Mom says you're lying about the money stuff." I stopped pushing the swing and knelt down to look Miles in the eye. "Have I ever lied to you before?" "No, sir." "Then trust me now. I'm fighting to protect our family, not destroy it. Sometimes protecting the people you love means standing up to the people who want to hurt them." That evening, Agent Rodriguez called with an update that changed everything. "Mr. Whitmore, we executed search warrants on the Sullivan properties today. We found evidence that Vance has been planning to flee the country. Bank accounts in the Cayman Islands, forged passport documents, airline tickets for next week." "What about Bridget?" "Her name is on several of the offshore account access documents. We're going to need to interview her tomorrow." I hung up the phone and poured myself a whiskey, the first alcohol I'd touched since the night Vance attacked me. As I sat in my quiet house, I realized that everything was about to come to a head. The custody hearing, the federal investigation, my marriage, it was all converging into a moment that would determine not just my future, but my son's future as well. But for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt confident about the outcome. Truth has a way of surfacing, and I had truth on my side. The courtroom felt like a battleground as Bridget's lawyer painted me as an unstable husband who destroyed his wife's family out of jealousy and spite. Margaret Stone was a seasoned family attorney who specialized in making good men look like monsters. Your Honor, Mr. Whitmore has systematically targeted his wife's relatives, costing them their home, their business, and their reputation, Stone argued. His obsession with revenge has created an unsafe environment for their 12-year-old son. I watched Judge Patricia Mills carefully as she reviewed the evidence. Her expression was neutral, but I could see her taking notes as my lawyer, Tom Davidson, prepared our response. Your Honor, Mr. Whitmore was the victim of criminal assault by Mr. Sullivan, as documented by hospital records and police reports, Tom said, standing with confidence. His decision to withdraw from a fraudulent loan was not revenge. It was self-protection from financial ruin. Objection, Stone interrupted. The alleged fraud has not been proven in court. Actually, it has, Tom replied smoothly. FBI Special Agent Rodriguez is prepared to testify that Mr. Sullivan has been arrested on federal fraud charges directly related to the loan in question. I saw Bridget's face go pale in the gallery behind her lawyer. She hadn't expected the federal case to move so quickly. Judge Mills called for a recess, and I found myself in the hallway with Tom, watching Bridget argue frantically with her attorney. She's realizing that her lies are catching up with her, Tom observed. The FBI testimony changes everything. When court resumed, Agent Rodriguez took the stand with the professionalism I'd come to expect from her. Mr. Sullivan has been running a sophisticated fraud operation for at least 3 years, she testified. Mr. Whitmore's loan was just one piece of a much larger criminal enterprise. When Mr. Whitmore withdrew his guarantee, he was protecting himself from liability in a federal crime. Agent Rodriguez, what about Mrs. Whitmore's involvement? Judge Mills asked. Mrs. Whitmore appears to have knowledge of her cousin's activities, but we're still determining the extent of her participation. She has been cooperative with our investigation. I noticed Agent Rodriguez didn't mention the offshore accounts or Bridget's name on the access documents. She was being diplomatic, but the message was clear. Bridget was under investigation. The final witness was Miles himself. Judge Mills interviewed him privately in her chambers, away from the lawyers and the tension of the courtroom. When they returned 20 minutes later, my son looked relieved. Based on the evidence presented and my conversation with the minor child, Judge Mills announced, I find that Mr. Whitmore poses no danger to his son. Furthermore, the criminal investigation surrounding Mrs. Whitmore's family creates concerns about the child's safety in that environment. She granted me temporary primary custody, with supervised visitation for Bridget pending the outcome of the federal investigation. As we left the courthouse, Bridget stopped me in the parking lot. Marshal, please, she said, tears streaming down her face. Don't let them take Miles away from me. I never meant for any of this to happen. You stood there and watched your cousin beat me unconscious, I replied coldly. You chose him over me, and now you're choosing to lie about it in court. What did you think was going to happen? I was scared. Vance said he'd hurt us if I didn't support him. Then you should have called the police instead of packing my son's bags. That evening, Miles and I sat in our kitchen eating pizza and watching the sunset through the window. For the first time in weeks, my house felt like a home again. Dad, are you and Mom getting divorced? He asked quietly. I think so, son. But that doesn't change how much we both love you. I know. And Dad, I'm glad you're okay. When Uncle Vance hit you, I was scared you were going to die. I pulled my boy close and held him tight, feeling the weight of responsibility that comes with being a father. The legal battles weren't over, and the federal investigation would probably drag on for months. But I had my son, I had the truth, and I had the strength to see this through to the end. The first drink happened 3 weeks after the custody hearing. I told myself it was just to help me sleep, to quiet the rage that burned in my chest every time I thought about Bridget's betrayal. Miles was asleep upstairs, and I was alone with a bottle of bourbon and the federal case files Agent Rodriguez had left for my review. By the second week, I was having 2 drinks, then 3. The insurance business was suffering because I couldn't focus on anything except the investigation and the upcoming criminal trial. My client started calling Tom Davidson instead of me, which should have been a wake-up call. "Dad, are you okay?" Miles asked one morning as I nursed a hangover at the breakfast table. "You look sick." "I'm fine, son. Just tired from all the legal stuff." But I wasn't fine. The alcohol was becoming a crutch, and Miles was starting to notice. The morning I found myself pouring whiskey into my coffee, I knew I had a problem. The intervention came from an unexpected source. Melody showed up at my door with a thermos of real coffee and a look of determination I'd never seen before. "Marshall, we need to talk," she said, pushing past me into the kitchen. "Sit down." "Melody, I appreciate your concern, but—" "Shut up and listen," she said firmly. "You're drinking yourself into an early grave, and that little boy upstairs needs his father to be present and sober." I started to protest, but she held up her hand. "I've been where you are, Marshall. After my divorce, I spent 2 years trying to drown my problems in wine. You know what it got me? Nothing except hangovers and regret." She opened her purse and pulled out a business card. "This is Dr. Amanda Foster. She's a counselor who specializes in trauma recovery. You're going to call her today. I don't need therapy. I need justice." "You need both," Melody said. "And you're not going to get justice if you're too drunk to testify effectively." That afternoon, I made the call. Dr. Foster agreed to see me the next day, and I found myself sitting in a comfortable office talking about feelings for the first time since my father died. "Marshall, you've experienced multiple traumas," Dr. Foster explained. "Physical assault, emotional betrayal, financial abuse. Alcohol feels like it helps, but it's actually preventing you from processing these experiences. So what am I supposed to do? Just accept that my wife chose criminals over her own family?" "You're supposed to feel angry about that. Anger is appropriate. But drowning that anger in alcohol doesn't make it go away. It just delays the healing." That evening, I poured the remaining bourbon down the kitchen sink while Miles watched from the doorway. "Dad, does this mean you're going to be okay?" "It means I'm going to try to be okay," I replied, "and I'm going to get help doing it." The next few weeks were harder than I'd expected. Sobriety meant facing the full weight of what had happened without any buffer. But it also meant being present for Miles, focused on the case, and clear-headed enough to make good decisions. When Agent Rodriguez called with news about Vance's plea negotiations, I was sober and ready to hear it. The news about Vance's operation was worse than anyone had imagined. Agent Rodriguez spread photographs across my dining room table while Miles was at school, each image documenting a level of fraud that staggered me. "He wasn't just running loan scams," she explained. "Identity theft, insurance fraud, tax evasion. Your case opened the door to everything." I studied a bank record showing transfers totaling nearly $3 million. How much of this money can be recovered? That's the problem. Most of it has been moved offshore or converted to assets that are difficult to trace. The victims are going to recover maybe 20 cents on the dollar. What about the other co-signers? The other families he destroyed? Agent Rodriguez's expression darkened. "There's a retired teacher in Tucson who lost her entire life savings. A young couple in Flagstaff who are living in their car because they co-signed for what they thought was Vance's legitimate business. 12 families total, Marshall, all trusting relatives who thought they were helping family." The scope of the devastation was overwhelming. I wasn't just a victim. I was part of a pattern of family manipulation that had destroyed dozens of lives. "Agent Rodriguez, what's Bridget's exposure in all this?" "That depends on what she knew and when. We've traced 4 different money transfers through her accounts, totaling about $80,000. If she knew those funds were stolen, she's looking at conspiracy charges." That evening, Bridget called for the first time since the custody hearing. Her voice was shaky, desperate. "Marshall, I need to see you. The FBI wants me to testify against Vance, and my lawyer says I might need a plea deal." "What did you do, Bridget?" "I moved some money for him. Small amounts. He said it was to keep his cash flow steady while the business got established." "How much money, and how many times?" Silence on the other end. Then, quietly, $87,000 over 6 months. I felt the familiar anger rising, but this time it was tempered by clarity rather than amplified by alcohol. "You laundered nearly $90,000 in stolen money, and you're just now admitting it." "I didn't know it was stolen." Vance said it was profits from other projects that he needed to move for tax purposes. Tax purposes? Bridget, you work at a bank. You know what money laundering looks like. I was trying to help my family. No, I said firmly. You were trying to help yourself. And now Miles has to live with the consequences of your choices. When I hung up, I sat in my quiet kitchen and thought about the conversation with Dr. Foster. Anger was appropriate, but it needed to serve a purpose. My anger would fuel my testimony at Vance's trial. It would protect Miles from his mother's poor decisions. It would help other victims get justice. But it wouldn't consume me anymore. 2 days later, the financial collapse accelerated. Vance's house went into foreclosure. His fake businesses were shut down by federal marshals. Bank accounts were frozen, assets were seized, and the entire network of fraud began unraveling in real time. Melody called to tell me that several family members were blaming me for the investigation, as if exposing crimes was worse than committing them. Let them blame me, I told her. I'd rather be the man who stopped a criminal than the man who enabled one. That night, Miles and I sat on the back porch watching the sunset. He was doing better in school, sleeping better at night, and slowly adjusting to life with just his father. Dad, do you think Mama's going to jail? I don't know, son. That depends on what the prosecutors decide and what kind of deal her lawyers can work out. Are you still mad at her? I thought about that question carefully. I'm disappointed in her choices, and I'm angry about how those choices hurt our family. But I'm not letting that anger control my life anymore. Good, Miles said simply. You're happier when you're not angry all the time. From the mouths of 12-year-olds. My son was right. I was happier, cleaner, more focused than I'd been in months. The collapse of Vance's operation felt like justice being served, and I was finally ready to help make sure that justice was complete. The federal courthouse in Phoenix was packed on the day of Vance's sentencing. I sat in the gallery with Miles beside me, watching as the judge reviewed the extensive list of charges and victims. Vance looked smaller somehow, diminished by the orange jumpsuit and the weight of his crimes. Mr. Sullivan, you have systematically defrauded families across multiple states, Judge Harrison said, his voice carrying the authority of final judgment. Your actions destroyed the financial security of dozens of hardworking Americans who trusted you because of family connections. Vance's lawyer had tried to paint him as a desperate man driven by circumstance, but the evidence was overwhelming. 12 victims testified about the devastation he'd caused, retirement savings wiped out, homes lost, families torn apart. When it was my turn to speak, I stood with confidence, my voice steady and clear. Your Honor, Vance Sullivan didn't just steal money from me. He stole my son's sense of security, destroyed my marriage, and forced me to question everything I believed about family loyalty. But in the end, he taught me that real strength comes from standing up to people who abuse your trust, even when they share your blood. The judge sentenced Vance to 12 years in federal prison, with full restitution ordered, though everyone knew most of the money would never be recovered. Bridget received 3 years, suspended to 18 months with 5 years probation. Her cooperation with prosecutors and lack of prior criminal history worked in her favor, but the marriage was irretrievably broken. After the sentencing, Melody approached me in the courthouse hallway. Marshall, I want you to know how proud I am of you, she said. You could have stayed silent, kept the peace, enabled the whole mess. Instead, you chose to protect your family and help other victims get justice. I chose to do what was right, even when it was hard. That's exactly what I mean. That evening, Miles and I celebrated with pizza and a movie. As we sat in our living room, our home that we'd managed to keep despite everything, my son looked up at me with eyes that reminded me of my own father. Dad, I'm glad you're my hero, he said simply. Why am I your hero, buddy? Because when the bad guys tried to hurt us, you fought back and won. I pulled him close, feeling the weight of responsibility and the lightness of victory at the same time. We'd survived the worst betrayal imaginable, and we'd come out stronger on the other side. The insurance business was rebuilding, my sobriety was solid, and most importantly, my relationship with my son was deeper than ever. Sometimes the worst things that happen to you lead to the best things you become. 6 months after the sentencing, Miles and I had established new routines that felt like healing. Saturday mornings were for pancakes and baseball in the backyard. Sunday afternoons were for homework and planning the week ahead. The simple rhythms of single fatherhood had replaced the chaos of criminal investigations and court proceedings. My insurance practice was thriving again. Word had spread about my role in exposing Vance's fraud network, and potential clients saw it as evidence of my integrity and attention to detail. Referrals were pouring in, and I'd had to hire an assistant to handle the increased workload. Mr. Whitmore, the Phoenix Business Journal wants to interview you about financial fraud prevention, my assistant Janet announced as I reviewed policy applications. Tell them I'm interested, but only if they focus on helping other small business owners protect themselves. This isn't about me being a hero. It's about preventing future victims. That afternoon, Miles came home from school with news that made me smile. Dad, I got accepted to the advanced math program. And guess what? My teacher said my essay about integrity and family was the best she'd ever read. What did you write about? About how you taught me that real family members protect each other, and that sometimes protecting people means standing up to the people who want to hurt them. I felt tears in my eyes as I hugged my 13-year-old son, amazed by his wisdom and resilience. The divorce from Bridget was finalized the following week. She was serving her sentence at a minimum security facility in Tucson, and we'd agreed on a custody arrangement that would allow supervised visitation once she was released. Miles would decide for himself how much contact he wanted with his mother. I might want to see her someday, he told me as we signed the final papers. But right now, I just want to be with you. That's your choice to make, son. And whatever you decide, I'll support you. On a warm evening in December, as we decorated our Christmas tree, Miles asked me a question that caught me off guard. Dad, do you think you'll ever get married again? I don't know, buddy. Maybe someday, if I meet someone who shares our values and treats you well. Would that bother you? No, he said thoughtfully. But she'd have to be really special, because we're pretty happy just the two of us. As I tucked Miles into bed that night, I reflected on how completely our lives had changed. A year ago, I'd been a trusting husband and father who believed family loyalty meant enabling bad behavior. Now I was a single dad who understood that real love sometimes requires difficult choices. The foundation of our new life was built on honesty, accountability, and the understanding that strength comes from standing up for what's right, even when it costs you everything you thought you wanted. Looking at my sleeping son, I knew we'd built something better than what we'd lost. We'd built something real.